Hello and welcome to Sonic Saturday, the show where I'm making my way through every single Sonic game. Today, we're looking at one of Sonic's forgotten sub-series, the Sonic Cafe games for Java phones. I'm going to try and be as thorough as I can, but there are a lot of them that have either been lost or have been very little written about them. I'm going to do this similarly to my arcade games video, where I'll mostly talk about what the game was and where it was available. Thank you so much to the Sonic Wiki Zone for having the resources available to make videos like this. Let's get started. As to be expected, one of the first releases in the Sonic Cafe line was a direct port of the original game, although it only featured the first act of Green Hill Zone. It was made available for free for the first month in celebration of the franchise's 10th anniversary in summer 2001. Released in 2001 for iMode phones, this game is explained in the title. Players would take control of either Sonic, Tails, Amy, or Knuckles to play tennis. This game would eventually go on to be replaced with a more updated version that we'll touch on later in this video. This game, alongside the updated version, was also released in North America and Europe through Sega Mobile. Released in 2002 for iMode and Vodafone phones, players would play as Sonic the Hedgehog through a 9-hole course. More courses could also be downloaded from the Sega Cafe service. It plays a lot like other golf games of its time, with a power bar, a diagram of where you're going to hit the ball, and changes in wind speed that the player had to adapt to. This is a direct adaptation of the card game of the same name, with Sonic branding over it. It was made available on certain iMode phones in early 2002, and featured both single-player gameplay against computers and local multiplayer in the way of passing the phone around. In this game, players are tasked with catching the biggest fish possible across 3 different stages under a certain time limit. It also featured a real-world clock mechanic, where different fish would be present depending on what time of day you played. Made in spring 2002 for iMode phones, the only Sonic element included in this release is with the lures, based on Sonic, Tails, and Eggman. Released in spring 2002 for iMode, players took control of Sonic to play a standard game of 9-ball. It features both a single-player and multiplayer game mode, working the same as Speed, where players would pass the phone back and forth. The second player would take control of Shadow the Hedgehog. In terms of mechanics, it works exactly like golf with the power bar and ball strike placement. Roughly translated as Good Friend Chow, this was the first 3D game offered on the service and was released in 2002 for iMode. The game is mainly a simplified version of the Chow Gardens featured in the main games, in that the players can feed, talk, and play with their Chow. Depending on how well you took care of it, certain wallpapers and other decorations would unlock for download through the Sega Cafe service. As the name suggests, this is a bowling game. Released in summer 2002, the player attempts to beat the 3 other computer players in 10 frames of bowling. A multiplayer mode was also included, allowing up to 4 players to play together by means of passing the phone around. Including in this mode was Tails, Knuckles, and Shadow. Released in 2002, this game saw players race as Sonic in a top-down style. The controls were simple, the card accelerated by itself, so the only input from the player was to make turns. The ability to race in time trials was also made available, and players could download the other players' data to try and beat their record, or race against a ghost. A version by Tectoy was made available in Brazil, and publishing was handled by Gameloft in other regions. This game is exactly like the Sonic Golf we talked about a few entries ago, but was in partnership with Coca-Cola Japan as part of a contest being held. Depending on the player's score in the game, they could earn C-Mode points, which could be used as currency on any C-Mode vending machine. 2 events were held in late 2002, before the app was delisted in December of that year. Roughly translating to Eggman's Number Guess Panic, this game is very similar to that of Mastermind, where the player must use clues given by Tails in order to disarm a bomb that was set by Eggman, except instead of colors, this game is based on numbers. It was released in fall 2002. Known in English as Sonic's Minesweeper, this was released in late 2002 and features gameplay identical to its namesake, except now it's Sonic themed. It featured both the timed mode and free mode. Released in late 2002, the game tasked players with racing Shadow by shifting their car's gears at the right time. There is no steering, but similar to real life, players must time when they let go of the acceleration key in order to shift successfully. Similar to other Sonic racing games, Other players' data can be raced against after downloading it from Sega Cafe. There was also options to upgrade both your tires and engine in order to make yourself faster. On a slight twist of other golf games released so far, this one sees Sonic playing mini golf. The player must choose the direction and speed at which their ball is hit, and interact with course obstacles as moving panels, transport pads, and breakable walls. Also similar to the other golf games, only 9 holes were played, but other courses could be downloaded through Sega Cafe. This is, as the name suggests, a port of the arcade game of the same name. Although this is technically not a Sonic game, it still gets roped in most of the time when talking about Sonic games. Sonic Darts is exactly as the name would suggest. Players are tasked with beating Shadow the Hedgehog in a couple of different dart game scenarios, who can either be a computer or played in multiplayer by passing the phone around. It was released in early 2003. Playing exactly like the game it's based on, players would be able to play official matches up to 3 times a day. The game required rings to play, which is why there was a play limit. Rings were given to the players incrementally throughout the day, however the game also featured a practice mode and a multiplayer mode that did not fall under this restriction. In practice mode, the player would play against Chow, and in main modes, the player would either play against Shadow, Tails, Amy, Eggman, or Knuckles. It was released in late 2003. Known in English as Tails Fly and Get, this is an adaptation of the minigame found in the GBA title Sonic Battle. Players must collect 20 rings within a certain amount of time and avoid obstacles such as bombs. Unlike the version found on GBA, this game is single player only and was released with the intention of letting players practice for Sonic Battle. It was released in December 2003, just one day after Sonic Battle. This is a sequel to the game we talked about earlier, featuring more playable characters and updated graphics. Otherwise, it features the exact same single player and multiplayer modes and was released in 2003. Released in 2004, hopping tasks players with clearing a field full of rings in as few steps in as short of time as possible. Players also have to avoid holes in the ground as they are played. Featuring a total of 30 stages, the only playable character featured is Sonic himself. For all intents and purposes, this is the exact same game as the first hopping, with all of the same objectives and gameplay mechanics. The biggest inclusion in this sequel is a story, which is simply that Sonic is sneaking into a secret Eggman base. In this game, the player must win a game of hearts against Shadow, Amy, and Tails. Similar to Sonic Reversi, the main game mode could only be played once a day, with the training mode being limit-free. Unlike a lot of its counterparts, this game did not feature the pass-the-phone multiplayer. In a twist to many of the other games on this list, the player assumes the role of Eggman rather than Sonic himself. The goal of the game is to guide Eggman through a series of different scramble puzzles until all of the panels are flipped the right way. In this game released in late 2004, the player takes the role of Sonic as he plays a standard game of backgammon against Dr. Eggman. The only difference from this phone port to the real game is the absence of the doubling cube. Similar to a number of the other games on this list, the player only had one opportunity a day to get the high score in the main mode. However, practice mode could be played as often as the user wanted. Known as Sonic Millionaire in English, this game was released in early 2005. The player is tasked with playing the standard card game Millionaire against Amy, Knuckles, and Tails, with the player always being in the millionaire seat. Like most of the games on this list, the player could upload their high scores to the Sega Cafe service. This is not the same one I talked about in my mobile games video, but this is the game that one was based on. Players are tasked with controlling the left and right movements of Sonic as he jumps up platforms to finish a stage. This gameplay is very similar to Doodle Jump, a game that would come out a number of years later. Players have a certain amount of time to beat the stage, and if they failed to do so, the water level would cover the stage and players would have to try again. The game used sprites from the Sonic Advance series on GBA. Like a number of the other games on this list, this is a direct adaptation of the card game American Page 1. Unlike others on the list, the players take control of Amy to play, and must outscore Rouge the Bat, Cream the Rabbit, and a Hero Chow. A total of 5 rounds are played, with mechanics similar to that of Crazy Eights or Uno. Once again, this game uses recycled art from the Sonic Advance series and was released in spring 2005. This is exactly like the first one, with updated graphics. The The same 3 times a day rule applies, and all mechanics have stayed exactly the same. This version was released in summer 2005. This game once again saw Sonic get behind the wheel. Players had to tune in at 10 a.m. each morning to race a different Grand Prix, and similar to other cafe racing games, this one allowed players to download other players' ghosts and times in order to beat them. Scores from the Grand Prix were also uploaded to online leaderboards. It was released in fall 2005. This is an updated port of the first Sonic Cafe game released, except instead of only featuring one act and zone, this port is a full Genesis game with no acts or zones removed. This version was released in late 2005. This game sees players take control of Shadow as you platform and defeat enemies using either a pistol or your spin attack. Each of the game's 8 levels are auto-scrollers and take place in a variety of zones. There's also bosses at the end of each zone. It was released in early 2006. This is the same premise as the golf game we talked about earlier, except as the title suggests, this one was played in a 3D perspective. The mechanics largely remain as you would expect, with the player choosing their club, speed, and place of impact, while attributing to elements such as wind speed. The game included 3 9-hole courses, each one split into beginner, intermediate, and hard respectively, with the difficulty being placed on how many obstacles such as trees there were to avoid on the green. Players can golf as Sonic, Amy, Knuckles, or Tails. It was released in early 2006. This is simply another adaptation of the game Speed, using all the same mechanics as the previous 2 releases, now available on more phones with a better, upgraded graphics. This one was released in spring 2006. Known as Sonic 7s in English, as the name suggests, this one is once again another adaptation of the card game with Sonic characters. Players take the role of Sonic as he attempts to win the game against Tails, Knuckles, and Amy. It was released in summer 2006. Like the remake of the first Sonic game, this is a complete port of the second game for mobile. There are a few new additions to this one though, such as the ability to start the game on the level you died on instead of starting from the beginning, and a boss rush mode. This game was also released in 2006. Released in late 2006, this is once again a Sonic-themed card game, this time being the Japanese card game Napoleon. This game also uses the same system others like it did, in that the main mode could only be played a certain amount of times per day, based on a rank system. Players can also receive items on a monthly basis, and once they are used, the player must wait until the following month. Opponents include Amy, Knuckles, Tails, and Eggman. Translated to Sonic Timed Train in English, this one tasks players with platforming along Robotnik's train cars through multiple zones in order to set all of the trapped animals free. The amount of cars in an area the player must go through is told at the beginning of every area, and once a zone is cleared, those cars will break off and set whatever animal was trapped in it free. The faster the player does this, the more points are given. This was the final game released under the Sonic Cafe branding, and was released in 2007. The game plays like a standard game of poker, and features Sonic, Amy, Knuckles, and Tails as opponents. Like a lot of the other games, this one worked off of a gold system, in which new gold would be given to players every month to use in betting. If a player ran out of gold, they would have to wait to play until more was given. This was a very interesting, and probably to the viewer, mostly boring episode of this series. However, my goal for Sonic Saturday is to leave as little stones unturned as possible throughout this franchise. Even if I can't play them all, learning about them and their existence is part of the reason I started this show to begin with. Old Java phones were definitely interesting when it came to gaming, but their place in history is important to remember. What do you think of the Sonic Cafe branding? Did you get to play any of these games? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe while you're down there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.